Although the Arrow Titan was a meme for the longest time in Total War Warhammer 2, in Total War Warhammer 3 Domination, it does have the potential to be quite a bit better in that slow, stationary-ish monsters can just stand on an objective and provide a heavy presence in order to hold that objective. Today I'm facing off against Nurgle with the Tomb Kings, another fairly unusual matchup, but should be a little bit less sad and depressing than, like, say, Nurgle versus Vampire counts, right? We've got ARKHAN the Black here up on his chariot. Looks like skeleton spears for myself up front. Second line of Tomb Guard, including the Kepler Guard. Also got a couple of skeleton archers, and then the Arrow Titan. Also going to bring in a Necrotech immediately in reserves. Off of reserves, I should say. We'll get to those in just a minute. KUGATH Plaguefather, Soul Grinder. We've got Forsaken, Cultist of Nurgle, Festering Stooges, and a couple Nurglings. Again, out of reserves. Let's once again quickly get to those. For the Tomb Kings, my reserve is a lot of Vanguard constructs. We've got 4 Sepulchral Stalkers with Vanguard and Stalk coming off the reinforcement point. Of course, charge defense against large. They've also got magical ranged, armor-piercing damage, anti-large AP and melee, and charge defense and charge reflection. So a lot going on here. Oh, did I mention also 80 armor and magic damage and melee and poison in the case of the Regiment of Renown? Yeah. Necrotect also for some healing, as you saw, and a Skeleton Horse Archer. For Nurgle in reserve, Death's Heads up in the sky here. Plague Drones with Death's Heads, Beasts of Nurgle, some Nurglings, Plague Toads, Forsaken, 2 Forsaken, 4 Nurglings, 2 Plague Toads, a Pox Rider, and 2 Nurgle Furies. And back in it now, you can see the Plague fire already. Well, it's not really fire. It is raining down, though. The Plague Mortars, KUGATHs, Nurgling, Yeet. At a distance, we'll be able to dish out pretty significant damage against these low-tier skeleton units. They're definitely not vampires, although the distinction might be a little bit lost on this one right here. ARKHAN the Black surging forward on his chariot, looking to perhaps test with some zombie summons, disrupt, just generally keep Nurgle off balance. That being said, I do have to be very careful of these Festering Stooges. Obviously, their armor-piercing Death's Heads missile attack will wreck ARKHAN in a big hurry, so as long as I don't terribly miss micro, should be okay, but yeah, definitely trying to perhaps bait them in. In general, it's foolish to try and snipe this unit. They are very, very strong, but we'll see. Of course, Tomb Guard famously in Total War Warhammer 2 were constantly vulnerable to Burning Head, right? And in this game, there's a spell that's not quite Burning Head, but it is very strong for the cost. Hopefully we'll get nerfed for Immortal Empire. Stream of Corruption will absolutely wreck. I mean, it is 100% armor piercing, so it will wreck most infantry units in the game, but still. In this situation, it's going to act sort of like a Burning Head here for Nurgle. We'll see how the AoE damage is. That being said, we come in with some chariot charges to straight into the Festering Stooges so they can't get a volley. That charge from the Necrotech also, I don't know if he actually had a charge animation, charge order rather, or if he just kind of blundered into them with a move order. No idea. But Forsaken have captured that low ground objective. I'm relatively fine for now. I'm going to do my patented Black Arc high ground rush to my opponent's objective. Do a nice little Shem's Burning Gaze at a distance there and get the skeletons into combat. Here comes a Stream of Corruption. There it is. Does quite a bit of damage to the skeletons there, but thankfully not too much to the Tomb Guard. We're going to get the Tomb Guard in against the Nurglings. Here come the Kepler boys. Yes. Fantastic. Oh, and there's the Soul Grinder as well, hammering into the side. Of course, the magic damage of the Kepler Guard will be pretty solid here, but right now they are just taking an absolute beating from the Mortis Drain, plus all of this damage from the single entities. Pretty brutal stuff, but as long as I keep my chariots moving, I should be able to win this infantry fight. Nice little detonation there from the bomb Nurglings. Meanwhile, the Festering Stooges fully surrounded here. I got them with the Skeleton Summon, and now engaged in the front with some Skeleton Spears and Tomb Guard. Spear Leech there up on the high ground on the Soul Grinder. We'll get some more cinematic shots of the Tomb Guard facing off against the Festering Stooges. Nice Realm of Souls. You can see it's already kicked off in Domination, and I think this might need some adjusting. I don't know if it's possible to set Realm of Souls specifically for Domination, but going off very early here, which is why, in many ways, it's it's tricky, because if you take a lot of skeletons in your starting army, you're almost guaranteed to get this early. But especially if your opponent goes with a high model count early army, you might be forced into this anyway. So it'll be interesting to see if the Tomb King's meta develops to where you just take a large starting army to try and get as much healing as you can off of the Realm of Souls, and then you can see the Shabti summon comes up to, again, fight the Festering Stooges, just continue to throw value at them, and at the very least keep them bogged down. But look at the pile of skeletons. I mean, I know that's partly because the summon just kind of falls over once they're done, but anyway. Also, the Arrow Titan up on the high ground. Let's let's get that. And I also should mention the death line of Sepulchral Stalkers. We'll get to that in just a minute here, but zapping some Nurglings. More Spirit Leech as well on KUGATH. Fancy new Spirit Leech animation. Yeah, actually didn't go off. Is that the old one? Anyway, yeah, it looks like the bound one from the Arrow Titan actually has the old spell effect. That's interesting. I should probably report that to CA. Anyway, yeah, the Sepulchral Stalkers, let's get back to them. I haven't really talked about them too much, but they're going to be an insanely strong tool for the Tomb Kings. Magic, range damage, great against demons. They're anti-large, AP, and melee. Not the best stats, definitely, but again, 80 armor means that as the current rosters are constructed, Nurgle does struggle. Of course, by the time you guys are seeing this, I mean, Creative Assembly literally leaked the DLC factions like day one of the early access, so you should know by now that Nurgle is very likely to get some mortal troops in the future, so I wouldn't take this as absolute meta, especially if they get some armor-piercing, anti-large, especially troops. That would definitely change the dynamic of this, but at the same time, maybe not. I mean, Sepulchral Stalkers, 50 speed, they're fast enough to stay in front of most Nurgle stuff, even after they get poisoned. You know, they can certainly outmaneuver some slow infantry, let's say, theoretically. If these guys were to get like some mortal Chaos Warrior infantry, like what Khorne has, then they still might be able to just hard outmaneuver them. It's hard to say, but anyway, the nice thing about these guys, they can protect themselves just fine from a toad attack, anti-large AP, charge defense. I mean, the AP doesn't really matter here, but certainly the charge defense does. The fact that they also don't have the best stats in the world doesn't really matter too much against the low-ish combat stats of Nurgle. More Spirit Leech on the Soul Grinder in the back line, and it's looking like we're going to be able to full triple cap here, perhaps. I did get a couple of Skeleton Horsemen to just skirmish down and rout those Forsaken over time. Haven't quite been able to get it done yet, but we'll see. Same time, my opponent also pressuring my own back lines with the Toads, continuing to go after the Sepulchral Stalkers. Eyes of the Desert now, Regiment Round have been summoned in. The ranged magic damage in particular is going to be pretty nasty against demons like KUGATH here. Is just going to be kind of forced away from this engagement unless he wants to take a significant amount of damage. But between the Skeleton Archers initially and now the Sepulchral Stalkers as a much more sturdy sort of ranged line, that short range doesn't matter so much against a faction like Nurgle or, you know, some of the other demonic factions. You can keep them pressured away from the objective, and I do feel that these guys uniquely, I mean, I haven't tested them as much against, like, say, Slaanesh or Khorne, where they're going to be a lot better in melee against you, and against Tzeentch, it seems like they could also be a decent option. Tzeentch doesn't have the longest range in the world, even though their firepower is significant. Definitely be a risk, but maybe as a, like, kind of backline protection against Knights, perhaps. I could see that, certainly, but I admit, this is probably the best matchup for them, the most ideal matchup, even after Nurgle gets their mortal units. It depends on what they get, I guess. Potentially, yeah, I guess we'll see. It all just sort of depends, but even still, I would say they're probably a pretty solid choice. Looking pretty good. We've got a Scorpion up here in combat as well to help fight some of these single entities, and definitely Sepulchral Stalkers taking some damage. Don't get me wrong, it's not like they're super OP or invincible or anything. One unit probably going to go down here, but just in order to have that presence, ranged, kind of hybrid melee monster presence, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot. There's a lot to say about those guys. And somehow the Festering Stooges are still alive, just duking it out with these Tomb Guards to the absolute end of times. Festering Stooges are definitely eventually going to win this fight, despite how much value I threw at them, but it's pretty impressive, all things considered. Let's see their own value. 266 kills and only 1,000 damage value. So that's what I'm talking about. Just tying them down, throwing skeleton bodies at them cost effectively until they die. Speaking of dying, Soul Grinder goes down to the Spirit Leech there, as the Cultist just gets bullied by Sepulchral Stalkers. And my opponent really hasn't been able to retake the initiative. We've got him on a full 3 cap, I think, at this point. I mean, not quite. Maybe he's still got control of that lower ground objective, getting some tickets there. But he's never even been able to take back this home objective of his since I took it. That being said, we're both getting pretty low on troops. Eyes of the Desert Sepulchral Stalkers have taken an alarming amount of damage, but can continue to heal this Aero Titan as much as I have these restores left. I think I've got, well, yeah, 1 use left. It's actually kind of nice. It shows you that. From the Necrotech, so still a little bit of healing possible. I could also use it, of course, on the Sepulchral Stalkers themselves, on this Tomb Scorpion. Got a few options here right now. Far enough ahead on tickets that my opponent would obviously need a 3 cap, and a second Scorpion help provide some monstrous presence here. Definitely cut through any kind of infantry, even armored infantry. They are relatively low tier, so you wouldn't want them fighting a lot of high tier units, but Scorpions were long the bane of my existence in Total War Warhammer 2. I had a pretty epic rant once upon a time when Tomb Kings were first released, just about the animations of these guys, but against Nurgle, yes, the animations are still going to be insanely strong, but he's not going to be dodging all of the shots like he would against another faction. Maybe he might dodge some Death's Heads, but anyway, that's besides the point. Let's get back up in here and watch KUGATH fight. See, I don't think they have any matched animations, but that'd be hilarious if they did. I think mostly the Aero Titan's just going to be zapping the belly button. Aw, we don't get to see any. That's okay. There it is. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching that one. It's an interesting one for me. Again, it's hard to really judge Nurgle. They're the ones that stand to benefit the most from getting mortal units on their roster, considering they have none, pretty much. So it's hard to judge these matchups totally, but there's a few things here that I think we can take away. Unless they give Nurgle a ton of extra speed, which I don't see them doing, I do think still that the Sepulchral Stalkers are a fairly solid choice here. Even though one of them didn't end up paying for themselves, the Eyes of the Desert got pretty close. The other one got almost 2,000 damage value, so very impressive stuff. And just as a sort of guarantee that you're not going to die to KUGATH especially, but just in general, and contest against some big nasty targets, seems pretty solid. Against the more melee-centric factions, you may want to opt instead for the big world beater Regiment of Renown Necrofex, right? Is that what it's called? Necrofex? War Sphinx? Necrosphinx, that's it. Okay, the one with magic and fire damage. Anyway, that's a discussion for another day, but interesting stuff. The Tomb Guard also performed reasonably well. Kepler Guard were able to pay for themselves here despite facing the dreaded Stream of Corruption. KUGATH, of course, like 4,000 damage value, no surprises there. Soul Grinder, again, gets really good damage done, doesn't quite pay for itself. Festering Stooges, same thing. I was able to tie them down and keep them from really contributing very effectively to the battle, which part of that's due to the summons of ARKHAN, part of that's just due to Nurgle's slowness. And Tomb Kings being sort of middle to slow speed, probably about the, well, maybe slightly slower than Cathay even, you could say. They can still be faster than a faction like Nurgle, certainly. So hopefully you guys enjoyed watching this one. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.